So we're back and we're continuing to talk about these kinds of complications around race and the Super Bowl, and also just this idea about sort of this notion that there's some sort of code of ethics. And Dave, I wanted to kind of come to you on this, in part because obviously, particularly as we're thinking about head injuries and we're thinking about sort of how the league treats its players, the furor around Cam dancing feels to me awfully misplaced.
I mean, code of ethics. There is a commissioner in charge of the National Football League who took the ALS Ice Bucket Challenge while his league formally denies that there's any connection between head injuries and ALS. This commissioner stood up, Roger Goodell, in front of a whole group of reporters, and they said, what do you think about football being dangerous? And his response was, well, it's also dangerous to sit on the couch. I mean, this is tobacco company level stuff. Remember when the tobacco people said, well, you could also die from eating too much applesauce. I mean, that's where Roger Goodell is. He's reached peak tobacco when it comes to his comments. And so to call Cam Newton unethical is just, it really does boggle my mind. And what Cam Newton, like Beyonce, has done is he's opened up political space to have wider discussions in the culture. I was listening to this show, Mike and Mike, on ESPN, which is, with all due respect, kind of a jackass show. And on it was this guy, Dominique Foxworth, brilliant guy, and he said, Cam Newton reminds me of W.E.B. Du Bois and the negation of double consciousness, this idea that you have to be one person in front of black people and another person in front of white people. And I'm like, oh my God, they just said W.E.B. Du Bois on Mike and Mike. And that's what Cam Newton brings to the table. That's a cultural power to educate.
And one of the coolest things about him is when he gives those footballs away to little kids after he scores a touchdown, most of those little kids are white. And they have no knowledge of Warren Moon and how the NFL forced him to play in Canada for years. He won every championship in the world for them to even allow him to start. And they're going to grow up in a world where Cam Newton is commonplace. And nothing about his race is going to necessarily permeate their consciousness. And I think that it alone is a revolutionary thing.
Well, Warren Moon was Cam's mentor. And one of the pieces of advice that he gave him was be yourself. Like, that's one of the regrets that he had when he was a player, is that he felt that he really couldn't be himself. And so what we see is Cam heeding that advice and doing it to the fullest power.
And I wonder if that also, Ben, let me go to you on this. I wonder if that also releases something in him as a player. I mean, literally, we know from research that sort of having to hide some portion of yourself, having to conceal, having to have that double consciousness can actually affect performance on things like tests or athletic performance.
Yeah, it really can. You know, you look back at in his young NFL career, and he wasn't a great leader. He had poor body language when things got tough. And when his teammates needed him the most, you know, there you see him with the towel on his head down, and not being a leader. And I think, you know, he took a lot of that advice that Warren Moon gave him and said, here's my epiphany. I need to start having fun. I need to be myself, because when you're yourself, you're relaxed. And as football players, we tell our players all the time, you play the best when you're prepared and when you're relaxed and you're not thinking, whether it's X's and O's or this read or that read, but it comes to your personality as well. If you can be yourself, then your leadership just comes out of you naturally. And I think that's what's happening. He is having fun. And they talk about it's the most fun team to watch because it permeates the locker room. Defensive guys are feeding off it, offensive guys, and it has created a team culture, a winning culture that everybody's going to be going after if they win the Super Bowl today.
Well, I'll say one of my favorite be yourself, just kind of permeate your leadership things. It's actually going to happen in a Super Bowl commercial today. It is a Pantene commercial, and it is going to be, you're going to see these guys doing the hair of their daughters. And I'm just going to do one more shout out for the university where I work, Wake Forest University. And actually, this commercial, this Pantene commercial, is based on research done by one of my colleagues at Wake Forest University about father-daughter bonding. And so in a league that has also had some real issues and challenges around gender, it will be a nice moment to see these men acting as fathers in this role. It'll be a nice moment. Thank you to Ben Lieber in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Also, thank you to my guests here in New York, Adam Howard, Shayna Renee Stevenson, and Dave is going to stick around a little bit longer because up next,